we are going to share everything we know as of 8:30 on 11/11/11. I promise. 2 years ago, the district began looking at this new testing environment. We knew it was coming. We started studying and we started talking about what those changes might look like. We kept hearing things like increased rigor, shorter time limits, college readiness, standards, and all of those words started formulating in our vocabulary at the district level about 2 years ago. We started looking at those state testing guidelines, and being the researcher that Rebecca is, who is our presenter today, she started looking and bringing back to us books and journals and articles and videos specifically about things that we knew the EOC would be assessing, the standards. And I don't know if you know, but there's a national movement about standards, and that's what most of testing is based on. We call them TEKS here in Texas, or we have for the last several years, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Those are basically our standards. And Rebecca's going to talk to you today about how the TEKS are the same, but now we have a new element called readiness and supporting standards. So she will be sharing that with you. We spent a long time last year debating, talking, studying, researching, and trying to understand where we were headed as a state. Because my bosses, unfortunately, live in Austin. And so when the state tells you that you have to do something, you have to figure out how to make it work. They pass the laws, and we have to figure out how to implement. So we decided, after lots of hours of debate and struggle, to pilot what we called SBG, standards-based grading, based on the data that we had coming in about the standards that were to come. We thought at the time, we started the pilot in January of last year, or this year, I guess. It's still January, it's still 2011. At the time, we thought maybe a team, 2 teams might be interested, 10 teachers max. Well, to our surprise, 7 teams wholeheartedly joined the program and decided that they wanted to pilot. And it's a good thing, because we've gotten so much information from that pilot as we keep piloting that it's helping us as we progress. In fact, we kind of are the forerunners of the district. They've been talking about it for a long time. We got on the move. It's expanded now to most of our high schools. It's in several of our middle schools, and I think that you'll see more and more to come. And when our teachers talked and we evaluated in May at the end of the year last year about whether or not to continue and what does the data look like, the data was positive and the future looked good, and the teachers unanimously said, I'm so glad we did this now with what we know about EOCs rather than waiting until this fall to start, because we've got a head start on everybody else. Rebecca has been at the forefront of this movement, not only at our campus, but at the district level and the state level as well. She isn't alone. She has a lot of teachers who are in here with us today who are behind her and support her. I am so proud of her and the work that she's done, and I think that you are going to be amazed by the information that she's going to share with you today. I'm also proud of our teachers. There's been endless hours of training, rubric design, redesign of tests, all as we've evolved through this process, and so I'm proud of their work. But I'm also proud of you for deciding to come today, to make the commitment to understanding so that you can help your child be successful. Like I said before, this is the biggest change in state assessment since the 90s. It's huge. We need your help. We need the kids to understand how important it is. We need you to understand how important it is. Because I promise you, here at the campus, we truly understand how important it is. So without further ado, let me thank you again for coming today and introduce you to my friend and our Director of Instruction, Rebecca Hayes.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. Thanks for being here. For those of you that don't know who I am, Rebecca Hayes. I am the Director of Instruction here. I'm going to set my timer so that we're out of here on time. Okay, just letting you know. You know, before we get started, I want to let you know just a little bit about who I am. Firstly, I'm a Cy-Fair grad. I went to Hancock, Belial. I graduated from Cypress Creek High School. My mother taught for 25 years in this district at Cypress Creek High School. And I knew that this was where I was going to come back. You know, I've been a DI for 7 years. But in 2001, when I sat in a science classroom at one of our high schools, we got some information from the state that said, we're now going to be giving you text statements. And now science is going to be added to the Texas assessment system. We said, what are you talking about? We're science. That's just reading and math. No, it's now going to science and social studies. This was just over 10 years ago. What we found that year, as we went through and began to look at the text and the curriculum that the state was expecting us to not only teach students, but the students were going to be expected to perform on later, a year later actually in the 10th grade, was what we found was that we weren't teaching everything exactly as the state. We weren't teaching the curriculum. We also found that we were teaching things that were in addition to the curriculum. We call them the love units in education. We taught a 2-week organic chemistry unit because we loved organic chemistry and we thought it was important that kids need to know this, but it wasn't part of the curriculum. We had to cut that out. A year later, as we began to go through some of this, what we realized next in the classroom was we would do something at the beginning of a chemical reactions unit. We would do an intro activity or a lab and students would say, oh, we did this last year. I remember doing this in 8th grade. Oh, I remember this. And then we got together and we thought, oh, wait a minute. So are we teaching the exact same thing? Where are we supposed to start? We knew what the expectations were for learning, but where do you start? At the very beginning, the atom is the building block, or we go straight into here's the reaction and here's how you balance it? We didn't know. So that year, a partner and myself, one of the teachers, we worked together and we went through the text from 6th grade to 10th grade, and we said, okay, here's what we teach, let's back it up to 6th grade. Let's find each prior knowledge in each school year that builds to this, so we know what they're supposed to be coming in with. Let's start teaching here, because we can't teach here, we're boring kids, we're teaching to the lowest level of achievement anyway. We can't do that, we'll never get to the highest, we run out of time. So we did that. We called that the underview. We used to tell kids it's like your underwear. It's what's underneath, nobody can see, but everybody's got it. So that's what we used to call it. So we had the underview. On the opposite side, we knew where the kids needed to go. We knew when they left our classroom to go to chemistry next year, here's what they needed to know from how we would prepare the kids, called the overview. So we had an underview and an overview, and then we had the middle, which was called the view. We broke it down by expectation of the state, and that's exactly what we taught. Long story short, within about a year and a half, this was adopted in 5 school districts in the state of Texas, and it was published, a variation of it for TACS, for biology, and IPC, and chemistry biology was published by Prentice Hall and is still part of our textbook in this district and 52 districts across the state of Texas for the current biology textbook. So it's interesting that, you never knew that 10 years ago is when this kind of started. And then here we are today, facing a similar change for an assessment system and curriculum, and we have to face that head on. The purpose today, close call. For those of you that aren't educators, one thing I'm going to share with you before we get started is I know you've been to lots of parent meetings. I'm an educator and I'm going to consider this like a classroom, and that's how we're going to handle this classroom, or this auditorium today. And I don't know why this is working. Sorry about that, I'm not sure what's happening. So here's our goal. By the time we walk out of here today, here's the outcomes. Here's our goal for being here. I want to create a collective understanding. We have to know what the STAR is, what the EOC is. We have to understand the why behind what we're doing. We have to understand the new curriculum. It is completely different. It's structured differently. It's totally different. I want you to gain clarity as to what your child and all children are going to be facing. I want you to know what's coming. This is going to be real, and this is going to be honest. And then I want you to know what our plan is, how we're responding for you, for your kids. While we're doing what we're doing, we need you as a partner, and that's what we're going to try to do today. We're going to try to foster a partnership with the community. We need you. We need you together so that we can do what we need to do for kids. It must be out of battery, sorry. I don't know what happened. All right, common understandings. You know, we need a filter to look through today. Everything that we do in education, you have to have your pillars. You have to have the lens through which you look in order to make all your decisions, to interpret things, to understand things. You have to understand the point of reference. These are the pillars of what we believe in education in this district and at Langham Creek High School and in Cy-Fair ISD. Firstly, we have to look at everything through the lens of learning. It's not about teaching, it's not about tests, it's about learning. It's all about the learning. 21st century teachers facilitate the learning. They don't just teach, they facilitate the learning in the room. That's their responsibility. Grades need to reflect mastery. This is state law. Students should earn grades based upon skill and ability. Some students are going to achieve higher than others. We expect that. Homework is practice, as in a sport, as in a musical instrument, as in anything else that you do. Homework makes you better. Homework is practice. It reinforces our learning. Data drives our decisions. Everything we do must be based upon data. It's data-driven decision-making. And we have so many different kinds of students. So many different kinds. All right, so let's start at the beginning. In 2006, the federal government, you may have heard this is Nickleby. The federal government came to the states and said, okay, no child left behind. You may remember the initiative in reading, 3rd grade, 8th grade, and that's when it also came to us in 10th grade. They put mandates to the state, to the different states, gave them requirements as to how they needed to fulfill the requirements of Nickleby. Here's just a quick example. We're just going to run through these. The ones with the green checks we're already doing. We've already been doing since 2006, or it's gradually started. A couple new ones that's interesting for you to note right here is this establish a state report card. That's the EOC and the 15%. That's where that comes in. So every student that takes biology in the state of Texas will have the same grade in their grade. It's a consistent report card. We also have the reading, math, and science standards. Instead of just having statements of learning, we now have learning standards. They're different. We'll show you those in just a second. And then we have the inclusion of all these kinds of students. And the inclusion doesn't mean that they're included in the classroom, like mainstreaming, which was one of the ADA initiatives. Inclusion means they're included in your testing. That's all that means. And so now everyone takes the same test this year, whether you speak English or not. If you've been in the country for 5 days, 5 years, or forever, every student takes the same test. Unless you're on a modified curriculum. So the last one, I don't know if you noticed this, at the very last it also says adequate yearly progress. And that's how you have schools that are underperforming or performing. This is our accountability system to the government. Of course, by 2014, which is when your students are going to be juniors, our requirement for annual yearly progress is 100% of students must pass the testing or we will be underperforming. And that's national. So that's coming. So here we have STAR. So now it brings us to today, and we have STAR, which is the new tax. So let's just take a quick peek at this. This is the phase-out plan. So I want you to know that although your students, the 9th grade students, are the first class that are affected completely by the EOC assessment system, we also have 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, or repeat 9th graders, that are still under the tax umbrella. So for the next 3 years, we will be doing a dual accountability system and testing model in this campus and all campuses in Texas. We have approximately 45 days required by the state in the spring for testing of students. 45. That's a lot. Now, we know you have questions. We know you have questions. We have questions. What I'm going to do for the next hour or so is I'm going to go through a lot of curriculum for you. I'm going to answer a lot of your questions. I'm going to pose some questions. I'm going to answer them. The goal is by the time you leave, you will have your questions answered. If not, we'll address those. What I'd like to ask you to do is to hold your questions until the end. If you have a question as we're moving through, jot it down. Jot it down on your paper, on your notes on your phone or something. Jot it down. If it's not answered by the time we finish, then we can address those questions. So here's the EOC schedule. All students are required, all recommended plan graduating students are required to take these EOCs, and they will go into a cumulative score in order for the student to be eligible to graduate. For the class of 2015 incoming freshmen this year, those students that took algebra and received credit prior to the spring of 2012 will be exempt from requiring the algebra EOC to be included into their cumulative score. So students that are currently sitting in geometry as a first-time ninth grader will have 11 EOCs. Any student that, incidentally, that were to come in from another district or another state, if they had an eighth grader that perhaps took English 1 as an eighth grader and is currently sitting in English 2, they would not be responsible for the English 1 EOC either. So here's basically what we have on our performance levels. You may remember from TACS that we had, you failed, you passed, you were commended. Similar structure in the EOC, it's a tiny bit different. First we have level 1, 2, and 3. 1 is you did not meet the performance standard. 2 is you did. 3 is you were advanced, which is equivalent to commended. You'll notice there's a minimum score, the dashed line all the way down. Even though that is in the failing range, it's called a threshold score. That threshold score will be important to all students, and we're going to tell you why in the next couple of slides. So it's kind of a threshold where the scores are going to kind of count towards passing, but not completely. I'll tell you what that means in just a minute. Just remember the minimum score, we call that threshold. So how will EOCs affect graduation? Well, all the EOCs are added together for the content areas. There are 4 content areas. There are 3 tests for each content area. They will reach a cumulative score by content area, and student must reach a required minimum cumulative score in order to be satisfactory performance and receive eligibility for a diploma. Students are required to take those 12 EOCs. They're grouped by content, so there are 4 of them: math, English, social studies science. 3 tests within each of those. Each content area is required a cumulative minimum score, the total of all 3 tests combined, in order for the student to be eligible to meet graduation requirements. We're going to go through this next few slides. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Incidentally, this will all be on the website available to you as a resource after we're done today. So there are different requirements for different graduation plans? Absolutely. And also no. For example, the recommended high school plan requires 12 EOCs. Remember that if you are an algebra 8th grade parent, just always think that's 11, okay? The recommended plan requires 12 EOCs, 26 credits. You already know the credit part. That changed a few years ago. The minimum high school plan requires 8 EOCs. Really, it's just 2 EOCs per content area for a minimum graduating student, and only 22 credits. Our goal is that all students are at least on the recommended plan. The way they're all similar is that every single student, regardless of the graduation plan, whether they're minimum, recommended, or distinguished, which we'll talk about in a sec, they're required to pass Algebra 2, English 3. They may not meet the threshold score like they can in some of the other tests. They must pass. They have to go to that next color up. Okay? That's a requirement. For the distinguished plan, some of your students may be interested in pursuing that, and we hope so. The distinguished plan, you're required to become commended or advanced on those 2 tests, Algebra 2, English 3. So let's kind of get a visual, okay? Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, those are the opportunities for scoring, okay? You're going to fall into one of those areas for each test. Test 1, Test 2, Test 3. 1 might be biology, 2 chemistry, 3 physics. English 1, English 2, English 3. Algebra, geometry, Algebra 2. Okay? So each student will have one of these with scores in it. Let me give you a bigger picture. Now, we don't know what it's going to take to pass. We don't know what the threshold would be. We should know, we're hoping, by February. Let's just say, these are not real numbers. We think this could be close. Let's just pretend for now that we'll use these as an example. So look at level 1, the minimum score. In order for the score to even make it to the chart for your student, it has to meet that threshold score, which is that dotted line. So there is an opportunity for a student to not pass the test, but meet that minimum threshold score, which is going to be pretty close, we think, and still have it count towards the cumulative score. Level 1, let's say the passing score, 1,000. And let's say that the level 2 score, or 3 score, which is the commended, 1,400. Let's just say, okay? We don't know. So let's look. By the end of this school year, well, by the end of the summer, your child's going to have something that looks sort of like this. Sort of. We don't know how we're going to track it quite yet, because we're not set up. We don't have the capacity. The school districts in Texas don't have this capacity to track quite yet, but we're going to get there. Let's just say, there are the 4 tests, let's just say, that I took. In Algebra 1, I scored a 900. So you see 900 there, so it's kind of in the top. Let's say in English 1, I scored 1,100. I'm better in English. So I'm in level 2. Science, 850. Not so good. Social studies, 900. So when you look at this, you have 1 passing score. You have 2 minimum threshold scores, and 1 complete failing score that will not count towards the accumulated score. All right, so what are you saying? Okay, so let's look at it a different way. We're going to teach this 3 ways. You're going to understand one of them. Okay. Let's just say we have 3 science EOCs, each with a minimum threshold score of, let's say, 900, and a passing score of 1,000. The cumulative score must be 3 times the passing rate per content area. Passing rate's 1,000. The minimum cumulative score to be eligible to graduate, 3,000. So let's take an example. Student 1, 900 in biology, 900 in chemistry, 900 in physics. They meet the threshold score, so it's good enough, sort of. But look at the cumulative. 2,700 does not meet requirements. They're going to have to retake a test to score higher. It's not good enough. Student 2, 1,000 in biology, 1,200 chemistry, because we have SPG in chemistry, and that's why. 1,200. Physics, let's say, 800. Not so good in physics. Cumulative score, 3,000. That matches the number that we need in the cumulative, but look at physics. Did not pass or meet the threshold score. It's not added into the cumulative score at all. Student does not graduate. We'll have to retake the physics test. They have to score above 900 in order for it to even add into the total. We don't know if 900 is a real number. That's a number we're using today. Student 3, 900, 11, and 1,000 adds up to 3,000. Absolutely, that's good. We're good on that one. 4, look at that. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 3,000. We're good on that student as well. Okay? None of these students would be eligible for the Distinguished Achievement Plan, the graduation plan. So can you retake an EOC? Yeah. In fact, sometimes you'll have to. Any score below the threshold score must be retaken. Anybody that wants to retake an EOC in one area, in order to raise the cumulative score, like the 999, that student has to take one. That student needs 300 more points to reach 3,000. Or if you just want, not so good in physics, let's say, but you're real strong in chemistry, like that one student, You could retake the chemistry to get a higher even score, maybe commended or the advanced, in order to bump you to the 3,000 without, you don't always have to retake your lowest one, as long as it's above the threshold. So does EOC, you mean it affects the grade? Yeah, it does. State law. Because you know the required uniform report card, that was national? This is the 15%. So the EOC will be converted into a grade. The state doesn't give us grades. They give us percents of correctness. They give us scale scores. 32 out of 50, 45 out of 55. We're to convert those into a grade and calculate them into the student's yearly course average. And this is posted on the transcript. This is what colleges will see. This poses lots of challenges for every school district in the state of Texas because we award credit by semester. But now we factor this in by a year grade. We don't currently have a year grade, so we're still navigating how to do this as a state. And we will do it. So is this EOC then going to affect GPA and rank? Good question. How we're going to report this is not concluded. It's not conclusive at this time. We know, here's what we do know. The 15% must be reflected in the yearly course grade on the transcript. Initially, the state had said that the school districts, there shall be a relationship between the EOC grade and rank. On Halloween, our update from the state changed the word from shall to should. Our school district is currently working in collaboration with other school districts to interpret this as to potentially have a different grade that reflects EOC on the transcript and possibly a separate internal Cypher ISD grade that would affect rank and GPA. We do not know the answers. That's not final. That's just me letting you know what I think is going to happen, and we will see. Like Dr. John said, we receive updates about every 3 weeks, and they change words like this, which are critical words. We'd already gone to the school board in August and approved a plan that said just what I said, and then the shall came out. So we had to stop that. Well, now the should is out. So we are on your side. So what does this mean? Well, really nothing right now. We know that we have to comply with the state. It's law. We will. But we are committed to doing what is best for kids. Yours and mine. I got a kid in this district too. It is not ideal to make decisions without all your data. We do not have all the information. We are in the process of making decisions, not a Langham Creek. Cypher ISD School Board. So how do you convert that raw score from the state, the 35 out of 52 or whatever it might be, into a grade? Well, we don't know. Because the state didn't tell us how they want us to do it. We don't know. Do you get 100 if you're commended? 95? Do you get 100 if it's perfect, but a 95 if 95% of the questions were right? Do you get a 70 if you passed? But if I was one from being commended, should I only get a 70? Right. We're working in collaboration with other school districts to make this uniform and working with the Texas Association of School Boards, or TASB, so that this is fair and equitable to students across the state of Texas. Our goal is not to hurt kids, but also not to give any student an advantage or disadvantage over another student. We're not going to be receiving any additional information on passing scores, rates, threshold scores, or anything else until February. We don't even know exactly what the state is going to require for the passing rate. Would it be 50%? 65? 70%? We don't know. We'll have more information in February. So when will you get the score? Well, that's a good question. Because we won't get them until June. Well, teachers are gone and students will be gone. So how we factor that into the grades, we don't know. Teachers are the only ones that can assign a grade to a student. We don't assign grades. That makes a grade arbitrary. So how this factors in, we're not quite sure, but we're going to make it happen. So if I take the EOC and I don't do well, I barely pass the class, do I fail? Oh yeah, yeah you do. If you do not pass or meet the threshold score in an EOC, and the score of that, based upon how they're converted into scores, causes the student, when the 15% is factored in, causes the student to fall below 70% passing rate, the student will fail. They will lose credit for the seat time credit for the class, and they will not receive any credit towards the cumulative score for the EOCs for graduation requirements. They will be forced to retake the EOC. Interesting point here, they do not have to repeat the class. They do not. Something to consider here, though, is we get the scores about June 8th, we think. We're also required to remediate a student for 10 days prior to retaking the EOC. That's SSI. They already have that 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade. Now it's with us as well, all grades. So we're required to remediate the student, and rightly so. But the first retest is July. So we're going to figure that out too. So do you have to retake the class if you just want to retake the EOC? No. No, you don't. Not if you passed. Can you retake the EOC if you didn't fail it? Sure. Anyone can retake an EOC. Whether they pass it, meet the threshold, or they just want to increase their cumulative score. Anyone can retake an EOC. All right, I know what you're thinking. So can I do that and raise my grade? No. You can raise your cumulative score, but the 15% that's calculated into the yearly average that goes onto this transcript, only the very first passing score will apply to that. Any additional scores will add to the cumulative, but will not change the transcripted grade. So, does PSAT, I've heard rumors about PSAT and all this stuff, an AP test. Well, let me tell you what we've gotten from the state. A student, this is a quote, a student's satisfactory performance on a PSAT plan, which is what we're doing on this campus December 1st for our sophomores. It's the PSAT version of the ACT. It's how we determine eligibility for the scholars program. PSAT or a plan test may be used as a factor in determining whether or not the student satisfies the cumulative score requirement. We don't know what that means. We probably won't know what that means this year. But by the time your students are at the grade level where you take a PSAT or a plan test, which is next year, keep it on your radar. Something's coming about this. We don't know, but something's coming. And I think it might be good for some. So is EOC really that different than tax? Yes. The EOC is fewer, deeper, incorporates process skills and college readiness skills. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's what college readiness means to the state. College readiness skills are specifically included in our Algebra 2 and English 3. Those are the 2 required ones to pass, remember we talked about? They're specifically included in those, which means that because you have to pass those and that has college readiness standards embedded within the curriculum and the testing, that the student has to pass those in the English and the math to enroll and succeed without any remediation in a credit-bearing college course. At the junior level, that's what that means. This is from the state exactly. So let's take like an example. I want to give you a little bit of a gauge. This is an example of a tax science released question from 2010. It's the last most recent release test that we've gotten from the state. This is an example of a science question. It's biology. Which of the following eating habits of humans? How many of you think you could answer that question? Yeah. Which one is it? Good job. Here's an example of the released question we got about 3 weeks ago for the biology EOC exam. Let's see how many of you can answer this one. If you'll just take a note of the vocabulary, of the Lexile score, which is what we say is the reading level. So would you say that tax is different than EOC? Some of you are probably not even finished reading it yet. By the way, it's a timed test. They only have 4 hours. If you're not finished, then they're wrong. So don't read too slowly, because you got a lot of reading to do. So before we move forward, I want to do a little thing. Just if you will quietly, just for you. If you'll tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, where you think you are in understanding, not perfectly, 5 would be perfect. I'm probably 4.7, okay? You're not a 5. I'm not a 5. I don't think Texas is a 5, for being honest. But where are you on a scale of 1 to 5? 5? I got it. I could be doing the presentation instead of you. 4? All right, I think I'm getting the big picture. 3? I'm okay. 2? Still pretty confused. 1? I don't know what you're talking about. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 5? Would you hold it up right now? Awesome. Outstanding. Y'all are good. Y'all are pretty good. So let me tell you what we do know. By the way, what I just did was a formative assessment to gauge my audience, to check the learning, and to see if I needed to go back and repeat anything or if we were ready to move forward. So here's what we do know. These are the 2 graphs that we got from the state. First thing we got, this. So take a look on the left side. These are the standards. New curriculum standards. The new standards apply to, for your students, math, science, social studies, English. We have readiness standards, those are the red ones, and supporting standards, those are the blue ones. What we've come to find out at Langham Creek High School as we have digested and audited the curriculum all summer long is that the readiness standards are much more comprehensive. The question I showed you on the biology one just a second ago was not a readiness standard question. It was a supporting standard, which is the blue. So 70% of the curriculum is supporting, what does that mean? 30% readiness. Readiness means I'm ready to pass the EOC and move on to the next level and be successful next year in science or math or whatever. Now if you look at the blueprint on the other side, is now how are we going to test it? Here's what you have to teach. How are we going to assess it on the EOC? Well, 65% of the questions are going to be the higher level and come from 30% of the curriculum. 35% of the curriculum, the test questions, are going to come from the other 70%. Why so complicated, you ask? Let's take a look at the blueprint that accompanies this that we got afterwards. This is biology. So if you'll notice reporting category 1, which is a nice way to say topic. Cell structure and function. That's kind of the big picture, the big idea. We have 4 readiness standards, 5 supporting standards for for 9 total standards. And it's going to be 11 questions on the EOC. So if you look down to the total at the bottom, you'll see there are 16 readiness standards and 26 supporting standards. At first glance, it might look as though we have 42 standards to teach. Let's divide them up, let's go. The ones that are readiness, let's spend a little more time on. The supporting, not so much. Right? Here's what we found out. This is an example of the geometry list of standards that we got to match the blueprint. Different contents, doesn't matter. So look right here. I know you may not be able to read that, that's okay. The big idea, the student applies logical reasoning to justify and prove mathematical statements. Student needs to use logical reasoning, we're going to the C, to prove the statements are true and find counterexamples to disprove the statements. Okay, that's our readiness standard. But what we noticed was this. Look at the supporting standard right above it. Construct and justify statements. It's like the emerging level before you get to the readiness. So we asked the state, is that right? And they're like, well, the supporting standards support the learning of the readiness standards. If you learn the readiness standards, the supporting standards should already have there should already be a support structure underneath them. Okay. So we look deeper and we find more supporting standards that feed into the readiness standard. So really, you mean we really need to teach those readiness standards deeper and fewer, and then along the way make sure that they understand the supporting standards that build to the readiness standards? So I don't have 42, I have 16? So we audited hours and hours this summer. Your teachers did. I'm going to show you just in a minute what we came up with. This is an example of a Math 2010 question that matches that, the closest that I could find, because that standard is new for geometry. New. This is the closest one that I could find that matched that level of curriculum from the prior texts, the tax text, where it talked about equal lines and rules between the two and things like that. So this was the question. Okay. We're looking at ratios, we can put the fractions, we can find the answer. But you have to know the skill to do this. This is skill-based, do you see that? Okay. Let me show you this year's version. This is the exact question. It is a readiness standard that matches the readiness standard that I showed you and read to you from the geometry list of expectations. This is the EOC question version of it. The answer is not important here. The point is, do you see how it directly aligns with the level of learning? With our text statements, they were called text as essential knowledge and skills, and that's exactly what they were. Here's the what of learning, and here's the skill that attaches with that. On the tax test, you applied the skill. On STAR EOC, the curriculum has changed from skill and knowledge to application of critical thinking skills and using the content as your vessel. You can see here that you don't simply need to know which lines are equal and different. You need to know much more than that. It's processing. It's a 2-step or 3-step thinking process to come to the answer here. So you know, what did the field data show? The state did field tests, a lot of them. We did them for 2 years here, and we added to the state data. The Sci-Fair ISD data aligned with the state data. We were maybe a teeny bit better, but not enough to really note. Pretty aligned across the state. And here's what we found. Algebra 1 students that took the Algebra 1 EOC field test, 64%. Here are the raw scores and the number scores. Not so good. Keep in mind, this was based upon curriculum that was text-driven, the tax. These are tax-taking students that took a field test on different curriculum. Just something to note. We look at all data when we make decisions. Now, we have challenges, hands down. We got 21st century kids that do not like a 20th century classroom. Grades have to represent the mastery. Law, it's a new state law. Grades and GPA are critical to Langham kids, and they need to achieve the highest scores they can. And we want to lead this district. And you know what's scary? Is that at first glance, the text from last year could kind of look similar to the new ones, if you really don't look closely. It could be tempting as a school or a district or a teacher. It could be tempting when you don't know what to do what you've always done. So now what? The information I just shared with you, we got last year about April. So we sit in the office, Cheryl, Dr. Johnson, Christy Geron, and I, and we say, now what? Sorry. I call her Cheryl. Here's what the state says about the difference between tax and STAR. It's not a problem that we give you all this information in April, because clearly it's going to be more difficult, but keep in mind, it's directly aligned to the curriculum. Just teach the curriculum. That's what TEA says. And very true in theory. But in reality, what does that look like? And really, that's what we care about, is the reality. At least I do. I love this cartoon. And let me tell you something. It would be really easy for us to put a crouton on tax and call it STAR. Yes, we're preparing your children for STAR. We're doing deep, enriching activities. We're taking them to higher levels of learning. But not with a crouton, you're not. What are you doing? We say that all the time. We say that each year. Get the kids to a higher level of critical thinking. We say that every year. It's not what you say, it's what you do. We sat down and we had to answer the hard questions. How do we know kids are learning those EOC standards? How do we know that? How do we prepare our teachers to do that? How do we get them to all collectively understand what I'm sharing to you right now? It's just a tiny bit confusing. How can we teach to the rigor of the state, but also not just make it so hard that kids fall? If your kid's a straight-A student, I want him to still be a straight-A student. They just got to learn more now. Because if you get the A, but you don't learn it at the A equivalent at the state level, you don't do well on the EOC, and I don't care what you call it. Is SVG harder? No. The curriculum is harder. So how do we report grades to know that we're aligned and doing the right things for kids? So kids know how they're going to do, at least have some sort of evidence, on the upcoming EOC. What do I need to do to prepare? What do I need? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What's it going to look like? What can I do now? And how do teachers know? What groups do we pull 2 weeks before the EOC to have these little study groups? Well, we just pull people that fail a test every once in a while. Well, what does that tell us? They're not good test takers, or they need help with it? We don't know. The bottom line, what standards do we want our kids to achieve every single day when they're doing something in the room, and how will we know when they got there? We owe it to kids, we owe it to you, and we're going to be honest. This meeting today is an attempt to be transparent. Because we can't afford to have secrets. And this is how we believe at Langham Creek. This is the leadership philosophy and the educational philosophy of this campus. And I will tell you, not all campuses are the same. You know that. There are two strategies that are the most common when there's change. Avoid and hope. We choose not to avoid, and hope is not our best approach. I know you don't want me to stand here today and say, I hope our kids do well, because I think our teachers are good, and they've done well in the past, and I hope we do. How would you feel? We have to teach to mastery. We have to know when we get there. We have to know what we're doing, that we're not doing the love units. We're not coloring maps because it's fun and it keeps kids quiet and we have a sub in the room. We can't do that anymore. We can't watch 45-minute videos because it reinforces the book we just spent a month reading. We can't do that. There's no video on the EOC. I mean, it's fun. But if there's nothing, if there's no output, we're not doing input. We don't have time. We just don't have time. And you know what? Our students are performing lower than, we're like 12th compared to other countries. Really? That's embarrassing. This is what standards-based education is. It's not just grading, it's education. All right. Cheryl mentioned the books. Dr. John, sorry. Everyone has a first name. I mean, it's not a secret. Here are the books that we read this summer. Last school year, really, I guess we kind of started actually now thinking about it. We started a year ago. We started a book study at the district level with The Fair's Not Always Equal a little over a year ago. It's a lot like The View that we published 10 years ago. Just different. It's not new. It's different. Yesterday at this campus, we had a consultant that works with Rick Wormley, which is the bottom right-hand corner book, on this campus, worked with teachers every period, all day long. She's going to be back tomorrow, 8 o'clock, right here, till 3 o'clock, with teachers from this campus training on what we're talking about right now. Not EOC, mastery, teaching, and learning and assessing. We want to teach it, we want to know they got it, and then we want to make sure you know what they got, and them too. Cheryl mentioned the Vanguard group. We call it the Vanguard group. It's a pilot, but it's a Vanguard group. That's a Robert Marzano term. Last spring, we had a little over 7 content areas. We had like a partial. 27 teachers, about 1,400 students were affected. I will let you know that chemistry was our very first team to pick up on this. They started a little bit kind of even before the semester ended last year. I don't know if this data correlates. I'd like to assume that it does. I'm going to do that for the sake of making myself feel good, but I'm going to tell you this. We don't know necessarily the causality of all the data right now, but we look at the data that we have, and I will tell you that this campus, our scores in chemistry, for the chemistry taking students that took TACs last year, were up 18%, and we were ahead of every other campus in increase in the district. Coincidence? Maybe. Excellent teachers? Could be. SVG? Maybe. I don't know. But it is what it is. This year, the fall of 2011, we asked the teachers at the end of the school year, who wants to continue? Because let me tell you something, it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and our teachers are absolutely exhausted. And nobody wanted to stop. No one. They knew exactly what we needed to fix, what we needed to work on, what we needed to move forward with, a couple tweaks, but no, we're not quitting, we can't. How can we, is what they said. This summer when we had a training on SVG, and we invited anybody that wanted to come, we ended up with 14 content teams. Every single freshman class that is an EOC taker with pure 9th grade is standards-based. Education, assessment, and grading. English 1, world geography, biology, geometry L. Why not geometry K, you ask? Well, there's an interesting thing here. Please realize that our Geometry K students are sitting right next door to our 10th grade geometry students as well. Not that we're not, well, and geometry text standards are being revised. We do not, that's the only content area is geometry that we did not receive the new curriculum. We'll get it in about March. Well, we're teaching it now. We have the full algebra, we have the full English, we have the full science, chemistry and physics already. But we didn't get the final geometry. They gave us a blueprint and they reworded some of them like I showed you up here. But we also have, I hit the slide, it was too many. But we also have you can go to the website and look at it. Revisions on the curriculum, and it is X'd out and greened and scratched out. The state said when we asked them about that, here's the I didn't ask them, the people did. Here's what the state's reply was. Just teach last year's curriculum in addition to the curriculum that we've provided so far, and the students should be fine. You know what, why would anybody want to change current grading practices? Because it's not easy. Because they're so imprecise that they're almost meaningless. Robert Marzano is an educator and researcher. Very, very, very well respected. So let's walk through this a little bit. Let me just kind of tell you, let me give you the mindset. Okay? What's a 75? Let's just say Unit 3. We give a test, and the student scores, your student, let's say your son, your daughter, your son, scores a 75. You see it in the HAC today. 75, Unit 3, major exam. What does that mean? Does a student, perhaps it covers 2 topics, 2 texts, 2 general area, 2 content areas, sort of. Okay, 2 standards, what we call them. Does he understand one completely perfectly, brilliantly, and the other one half? Perhaps understands them both at an average level, 3/4 or 75% for both. Does this student need an intervention? Is there a misconception on one of those that prevents the student from being able to answer correctly? They've mislearned something, it's solidified in their memory, and now they're applying it, and they don't get it. And the other one is so perfect. What do we do? Two scores go in the gradebook, one for each standard. The test is split according to the material it addresses. Another student could get a median score on both. So let's play this out. If we had, here's standard 1, here's standard 2, here's standard 3. We have a test. It only covers standard 1 and 2. So when we put test in the gradebook, an X might go visually in standard 3 because there's none. Doesn't apply. Standard 1, perfect, 4+. I mean, got all the questions right. And have they completely mastered it and they're done and we should just move on and not learn anything more about that? No. It means right here with this piece of data, got everything right. So right now, they're as perfect as they can be, 4+. Okay, 98. The other one, miserable. Nothing. 1-. 1- means we have some data and we are moving forward, and maybe with some help, or they got one thing right, or with some help they can maybe get to the 1, but on their own, no. It's failing. It's a 60. Do we know what we need to do now? Do you know what tutorial you need to come and ask for? Do we know what you need to go on, what video you need to watch, what you need to stay after with this teacher, and what you need to fix? Absolutely. Let's say the other student that scored 75% on both. In the grade book, an X on the 3, because that's not tested. The 1 and the 2 are 75. It's 2. 2, 2, and X. The other student, 4 plus, 1 minus. 2 completely different students. So the next day in class, when the kids kind of get together and group themselves as to what they need to do in the classroom in order to get better, to learn, to move on, the 4 plus student goes to this other area where he needs to learn on the 1 minus. We don't need a full class tutorial on everything that was on the test. I know half of it perfectly. Let's move on. I need more concentrated work and learning here. It's not about the grade. The grade is a byproduct. We want the grade to represent the learning. We want the learning to increase so that the grade can increase. Because A plus students, they don't usually make 1 minuses. And if they do, there's a misconception, and we need to fix it. We need to fix it. So, traditional grades represent multiple concepts, and they're organized by assignment type. Quiz 1, test 3.2, fractions homework, right? We categorize our grades by daily grades, major grades, alternative assessments, right? You look at your test percentage, it's 60%. You look at your daily grade, 20%. Assessments, 20%, to make 100%. Standards-based grades are the same assignments, plus more actually. They're more. And they're organized by standard. They're organized by standard. They're not organized by major grade, daily grade. The major grade goes in, the daily grade goes in. Do we still have major grades? Yeah, summative assessments, which we're going to talk about in a minute because we've kind of got an issue there. We'll talk about that. Because, you know, if we're really going to get the kid to the level of those questions that I showed you, and we start with content, I'm going to go teacher on you. We start with content that is at the level where kids don't know, where they don't have any knowledge yet, where we're just beginning so that we can move as deeply as we need to. The expectation is they don't know it when we start. Your first grade on something should be down here, and then as it grows, we build. The first day in class, we may only cover the 1. I may just get you started, because I need to figure out if you can't even get to the 1, then you've got some prior knowledge gaps. And it happens in K and L. We get to everybody where they need to go. Some of them run straight to the 3 immediately. It's not about the assignments and completing them. It's about the level of understanding that the completing of the assignments is intended to teach you. Take a quick peek at this. This is what I just kind of talked about. John, Bill, Susan, Felicia, Amanda. Homework average, quiz, chapter 1 test. What data do you see from that? Well, maybe Susan's not a good test taker. She doesn't do well on quizzes and tests, but look at her homework. Maybe she has an older brother that took the course last year, helps her at home. Maybe she copies at lunch. Maybe she has test anxiety and she gets nervous in the classroom. Maybe her boyfriend just broke up with her. Look at Felicia. She obviously doesn't do homework. Or maybe she just doesn't get it. Likely doesn't do it. But look at her quiz. She's probably sitting in the classroom bored. You probably have kids like that. She's like, I don't know why I have to do all this stuff. I already get it. So look at the bottom. This is what it would look like possibly in a standards-based grade book. Look at Bill. Not only does he not do his homework, he's completely deficient. He doesn't get it. Writing an alternative ending for a story, he doesn't get it. He doesn't know how. Do you see the difference in the data? So I'm going to do a little example with you. Just do a little experiment. How many of you remember, you don't have to know all the details, but do you remember learning about photosynthesis? Okay. And we know that the photosynthesis You know, the trees give off oxygen, which they say, take a plant to work, or put a plant in your house, it'll make your air fresher. You heard that? Yeah. And we know that there's the ozone layer and the carbon dioxide that's affecting our trees, and right? Deforestation, there's an issue with that because of air quality. And when we say, see the seed? It turned into the tree. How did the seed turn into the tree? It grew. So when we ask people, general people, and I mean smart people, I asked my husband this last night. How does the seed turn into the tree? Where does all the mass come from? The three most common answers are water, soil, sunlight, nutrients from the ground, right? Would most of you, does that sound reasonable? That's what, quite honestly, that's what everybody says. I'm going to share a quick video with you.